My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a project manager for a healthcare software company, which basically means I spend my life keeping calm while other people panic over deadlines, missing files, and decisions they should have made 3 weeks earlier. But nothing in my job prepared me for what happened at my sister's wedding. The ceremony had just ended. Everyone was still glowing from it, still carrying champagne glasses and smiling at people they barely knew. My sister, Emily, looked perfect in her dress. My mother kept dabbing at her eyes. My father stood near the family table with that proud, polished expression he used whenever he wanted strangers to believe we were closer than we actually were. I remember sitting down and immediately feeling something tighten in my stomach. My parents were being too nice. My mother touched my shoulder twice. My father asked if I needed water. Emily looked everywhere except at me. Then my dad placed a folder on the table. Not a card, not a wedding program, a folder. He opened it just enough for me to see the top page, and my throat went dry before I even read the title. Property transfer documents. My mother leaned closer and said it was time to do the right thing for the family. My father slid the papers toward me like we were in a bank office instead of at my sister's reception. He told me to sign. I stared at him, then at Emily, who suddenly became very interested in the flowers on the centerpiece. The penthouse they wanted was not theirs. It had never been theirs. It belonged to my grandmother, and when she died, she left it to me. Only me. So I pushed the papers back across the table and said, as steadily as I could, that I was not signing away my penthouse. Not there, not ever. For 1 second, no one moved. Then my father slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through that little corner of the reception like a glass breaking. Conversations nearby died instantly. My cheek burned. My ears rang. My mother whispered my name like I had embarrassed her, not like he had hit me, like I had caused the problem by refusing quietly. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I did not cry. I did not scream. I just looked at the papers, then at the 3 people who had brought them to a wedding like a trap, and I walked out. The air outside was cold enough to sting my face. I had barely reached the curb when a black limo pulled up in front of the venue. The back door opened. Someone stepped out. And when my father saw who it was, all the color left his face. Then he ran for the door. If you've ever been treated like the problem for finally protecting yourself, stay with me. Drop your city and local time below, because I always like seeing where these stories reach. Subscribe if stories like this speak to you, like this video if you already believe silence is not weakness, and turn on the notification bell so the next story finds you when it's posted. Around here, quiet people notice more than others think. Now let me take you back. I was not the dramatic daughter in my family. I was not the difficult one, the fragile one, or the one everyone gathered around. That role belonged to Emily. Emily was 2 years younger than me, beautiful in a way people mentioned out loud, emotional in a way people excused quickly, and helpless in a way my parents seemed to find almost charming. If Emily forgot something, someone rescued her. If Emily cried, the room rearranged itself around her. If Emily wanted something, my parents treated it like a family emergency. I was the other kind of daughter. The useful one. The one who could handle it. When I was 16 and sick with the flu, my mother still asked me to help Emily finish a school project because you're better at that stuff. When I got into a good college, my father said he was proud, then reminded me not to make Emily feel left behind. When I started working full-time and paid my own rent, my parents called me independent, but what they meant was available. Available to help, available to forgive, available to understand why Emily needed more. For a long time, I mistook that for strength. My grandmother never did. Grandma Ruth lived in a penthouse on the 11th floor of an old brick building downtown. It was not flashy the way people imagine penthouses. It had creaky floors, warm lamps, books stacked on side tables, and windows that caught the sunrise before the rest of the city woke up. To me, it was the only place in my childhood where I did not have to earn softness. Grandma Ruth noticed things. She noticed when I went quiet at dinner. She noticed when my parents praised me only after I made their lives easier. She noticed when Emily interrupted me and everyone let her. When I was 13, Grandma gave me a brass key to her place. She said it was for emergencies, but I knew what she meant. It was permission to come somewhere I did not have to perform. That key stayed on my ring for years. Through college, through my first apartment, through every Sunday visit where Grandma made tea, asked real questions, and listened to the answers like they mattered. So when she died, the grief did not feel like losing a relative. It felt like losing the one witness who had understood the shape of my life. At the reading of her will, my parents sat beside me in stiff silence. Emily cried softly into a tissue. I remember thinking the worst part was already over. Then the attorney announced that the penthouse had been left solely to me. For a moment, the room was so still I could hear the heating system click on. My father did not look sad anymore. He looked insulted. My mother's mouth tightened. Emily looked at me like I had taken something from her, even though I had not known until that second. I should have realized then that the penthouse would never just be a home to them. To my parents, it became proof that Grandma had chosen wrong. To Emily, it became something I had that she deserved more. To me, it was still the place where I had once felt safe. And that was what they never forgave. Because in my family, love always came with an invoice. Grandma had left me the only thing they could not guilt me into sharing easily. And from the way my father stared across that attorney's table, I understood something cold and quiet. They were not finished. They were only deciding how to make me give it back. At first, they were careful about it. That was what made it so uncomfortable. Nobody called me the next day demanding keys. Nobody said outright that Grandma had been wrong. My parents knew better than that. They started with small comments, the kind that sounded reasonable if you did not know the history behind them. My mother would call and ask if I had been by the penthouse recently. If I said yes, she would sigh and say it must feel strange being there alone. Then she would add that a place like that was too much space for one person. My father took a different approach. He talked about maintenance fees, property taxes, insurance, repairs, things he had never cared about when Grandma was alive. He said owning property was a big responsibility and that I should be practical, not sentimental. That was always the word they used when they wanted me to give something up. Practical. A practical daughter did not complain. A practical daughter understood timing. A practical daughter made sacrifices before anyone had to admit they were asking for them. For a few weeks, I tried to answer calmly. I told them I had already spoken with the building manager. I told them the expenses were manageable. I told them I was not making any big decisions while I was still grieving. My mother got quiet whenever I said that. Then she would say, "Of course, we just don't want you clinging to something because you're emotional." It was strange how quickly my grief became inconvenient to them. Emily's wedding was already in motion by then. Dress fittings, flower appointments, seating charts, group texts that somehow always included me when money or planning was involved. I helped where I could. I wanted to be decent. I wanted to prove, maybe to myself more than anyone, that keeping the penthouse did not mean I was turning into some cold, selfish person. Emily made that harder. She never demanded the penthouse directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she started talking about how stressful it was to begin married life without stability, how expensive everything had gotten, how she and Mark wanted to start fresh but did not want to waste money renting some tiny place. Then she would pause, waiting for me to fill the silence with an offer. I never did. One afternoon, while we were looking over wedding favors at my parents' house, Emily said, "It's just hard knowing there's this beautiful place sitting there, and everyone is acting like I'm awful for being sad about it." Everyone. That word sat between us. No one had called her awful. No one had even told her no except me. But somehow my refusal had already been turned into a group injury. My mother reached across the table and rubbed Emily's arm, then looked at me like I was supposed to fix what I had broken. I remember saying carefully, Grandma left it to me. My father was in the doorway. I had not even heard him come in. He said, "Your grandmother made a decision when she was old, grieving, and not thinking about the whole family." Something in me went still. He had never said it that plainly before. Then he softened his voice, which somehow made it worse. He said I had the chance to correct something painful. He said the penthouse should stay useful to the family, not locked up because I was attached to a memory. A memory. That was what he called the place where Grandma had made me tea after my first breakup. The place where she kept an extra blanket on the couch because she knew I got cold easily. The place where she let me sit in silence without asking me to explain myself. To them, it was square footage. To me, it had been shelter. After that, I started noticing things I wished I could ignore. My mother mentioned that transfers like this can be simple if everyone cooperates. I had never said anything about a transfer. My father asked whether I had the deed stored safely or if it was with the estate people. Emily told me, almost brightly, that after the wedding everything would feel settled. Settled? Not discussed, not decided, settled. The worst part was that they still smiled while saying these things. They still asked about my job. They still told relatives I was doing well. In public, we were a normal family preparing for a wedding. In private, I felt like furniture being slowly moved toward a door. A week before the wedding, I went to the penthouse after work. I had not planned to stay long. I only wanted to check the mail and water the plants I had not had the heart to move. But when I opened the door, the familiar smell hit me first. Lemon cleaner, old books, and the faint lavender sachets Grandma used to tuck into drawers. The whole place was quiet. Not empty, quiet. I stood in the entryway with my keys in my hand, and my thumb found the old brass one without thinking. Grandma had given it to me when I was 13. It was worn smooth at the top from years of use, and for a few seconds I just held it, trying to remember the sound of her saying I could come over whenever I needed. On the dining table, there was still a small wooden box of her papers I had not finished sorting. Birthday cards, old receipts, a few notes in her careful handwriting. I opened one folded page and saw only a line before I had to close it again. She had written my name. Not Emily's, not my father's, mine. I did not read the rest. Not then, I could not. But I remember thinking that Grandma had known exactly what she was doing, and maybe that was what made them so angry. My phone buzzed while I was still standing there. It was a message from my mother reminding me not to make things tense at the wedding. She said Emily deserved a peaceful day. She said Dad was under a lot of stress. She said we all needed to come together as a family. Then, at the very end, she wrote, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked around the penthouse, at the windows Grandma used to open in the morning, at the chair where she had sat with her tea, at the home they kept speaking about like a mistake waiting to be corrected. And for the first time, I understood they were not asking anymore. They were arranging. They were choosing the moment, the place, the pressure, and the audience. I set my phone down on Grandma's table and stood there in the quiet, feeling surrounded in a way I could not yet prove. But I was beginning to pay attention. I did not call her that night because I wanted a fight. I called because I wanted someone outside the family to tell me I was not imagining things. Grandma's estate executor was a woman named Marlene Shaw. She had been Grandma's friend for years before she ever handled paperwork for her. I remembered her from the will reading as calm, direct, and almost painfully precise. The kind of person who made you sit up straighter without raising her voice. When I called, I tried to sound casual. I failed. I told her my parents had been asking strange questions about the penthouse. I told her my mother had mentioned transfers. I told her my father had asked where the deed was. I did not tell her I was scared at first, because saying that out loud made it feel too real. Marlene was quiet for a few seconds. Then she asked me to forward every message I had. Not some, every. That was the first moment my stomach dropped. The next morning, she called me back and said Grandma Ruth had been very clear about the penthouse. It was not an accident. It was not confusion. It was not an emotional mistake made by an old woman, no matter what my father wanted to believe. Grandma had left notes with the estate file. Nothing dramatic, nothing like a movie, just careful records. Old loans my father had never repaid. Times he had pressured her to keep things in the family. A written explanation that the penthouse was to go to me because I had cared for the home, respected her boundaries, and never treated her like an account to be drained. I sat at my kitchen table while Marlene explained it, one hand around a coffee mug I had not taken a sip from. The part that hurt most was not that Grandma had protected me. It was that she had known I would need protecting. Marlene told me not to sign anything without independent legal review. Not a draft, not a family agreement, not a temporary arrangement. She said if anyone tried to rush me, especially in a public or emotional setting, I should step away and call someone immediately. That phrase stayed with me. A public or emotional setting. I thought of the wedding. After that call, I stopped responding from my feelings and started saving everything. Screenshots, voicemails, texts where my mother said I was making things tense, messages where Emily talked about everything being settled, even the little comments that seemed harmless on their own. At work, organizing information was second nature. Timelines, records, dates, decisions. So I made a folder on my laptop and named it something boring enough that nobody would notice if they saw my screen. Estate follow-up. Then Marlene gave me the name of an attorney. His name was Daniel Ortiz, and our first conversation was nothing like I expected. He did not sound shocked. He did not promise anyone would be punished. He did not tell me my family was evil or that I should make a scene. He asked practical questions. Had they given me documents yet? Had anyone threatened me? Would I be alone with them before the wedding? Did I plan to drink at the reception? Did they have access to my apartment, my email, my personal files? The questions made me feel embarrassed at first, like I had let things get too far. Then I realized he was not judging me. He was building a fence around a situation I had been taught to leave open. His advice was simple. Do not sign anything. Do not accept documents privately. Do not get pulled into a room alone. Keep your phone charged. If they try to pressure you, leave the conversation. If they do it publicly, witnesses matter. Witnesses. That word made the wedding feel different in my mind. My parents thought a room full of relatives would trap me. Daniel saw the same room and called it evidence. I still almost did not go. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of my closet staring at the blue dress I had already bought. My phone kept lighting up with family messages about arrival times, photos, seating, being cheerful for Emily. Every message carried the same quiet warning underneath it. Behave. Make this easy. Do not embarrass us. I wanted to stay home. I wanted to lock the penthouse door and pretend the whole day had nothing to do with me. But there was still a part of me, smaller than before but not gone, that hoped they would choose not to cross that line. So I went. But I went differently. I did not bring any estate papers. I did not bring the deed. I charged my phone to 100% and put a portable battery in my purse. I forwarded my parents' latest messages to Daniel and Marlene. I kept the brass key on my ring, even though I touched it twice in the car like it was something steadier than metal. Marlene told me she would be near the venue that afternoon because she had a meeting downtown with Daniel about another estate matter and could be available if needed. It sounded ordinary. That was what made it believable. Nobody was waiting in the wings like some rescue team. They were just close enough that I did not have to be completely alone. At the ceremony, I sat where I was told to sit. I smiled for photos. I hugged relatives. I congratulated Emily and meant it as much as I could. For a few hours, nothing happened. That almost made it worse. Then, after the ceremony, my mother appeared beside me and guided me toward the family table. My place card was set between my parents. Emily stood nearby in her white dress, twisting her bouquet ribbon around one finger, avoiding my eyes. And my father looked at me with the same calm expression he had worn at the will reading. That was when I knew. The moment had arrived, and they had no idea I had stopped coming alone. My father did not waste time. As soon as I sat down, he placed the folder in front of me like it had been waiting there all day. My mother leaned close enough that her perfume made my stomach turn. Emily stayed standing beside the table, just behind my father's shoulder, close enough to hear everything and far enough to pretend she was not part of it. Dad opened the folder. The papers were already printed, marked, tabbed. My name was on the top page. He said it had all been prepared to make things easier. My mother said Emily deserved to begin her marriage without family tension hanging over her. Then Dad pushed a pen toward me and told me to sign. For a second, I just looked at the tabs. They really thought the wedding would do it. The dress, the music, the relatives, the pressure of being watched. They thought I would rather lose Grandma's home than be called selfish in public. I pushed the papers back. I told them I was not signing away my penthouse. Not at Emily's wedding, not without my attorney, not ever under pressure. My mother inhaled sharply, like I had cursed in church. Emily's eyes filled with tears immediately, but she still did not step forward. She just looked hurt enough for other people to notice. My father's face changed. Not loudly, not at first. His jaw tightened. His eyes went flat. He leaned in and said I was embarrassing the family. I remember my hand touching the brass key in my purse. Then I said, quietly, that Grandma left it to me for a reason. That was when he slapped me. The sound cut through the table, through the clink of glasses and the low music and the soft laughter nearby. My cheek burned hot, then numb. A woman behind me gasped. Someone said my father's name. My mother whispered mine. Not with concern. With warning. I stood up before my knees could shake too badly. I looked at the papers still sitting between us, clean and official and ugly, and I understood that whatever I had hoped they would not become, they had become it anyway. I walked out. The cold air hit my face the moment I stepped through the venue doors. I had only taken a few steps toward the curb when the black limo pulled up. For one strange second, I thought I might cry from relief before anyone even got out. The back door opened, and Marlene Shaw stepped onto the sidewalk in a dark coat, calm as ever. Daniel Ortiz got out behind her, carrying a slim leather folder. Beside them was Mark's uncle, the retired judge I had barely spoken to during photos, his expression quiet but very serious. Behind me, the venue doors opened. My father had followed. Then he saw Marlene. I watched the recognition hit him. Not fear of being hurt, fear of being seen, fear of being contradicted by someone who knew exactly what Grandma had written and why. He turned and hurried back inside so fast, he almost bumped into a server. That was the moment I finally understood why he had always preferred private pressure. In private, he could control the story. Outside, with witnesses and documents and people who were not trained to obey him, he was just a man who had hit his daughter because she would not sign over property. Daniel did not make a speech. He did not threaten anyone in the parking lot. He asked if I was hurt. He asked where the documents were. Then he went inside with Marlene and Mark's uncle while I stayed near the limo, breathing through the sting in my cheek. Later, I heard what happened in pieces. The papers were collected. The people closest to the table confirmed what they had seen. Mark's family learned that no, the penthouse had not been promised legally, and no, I had not agreed to give it up after the wedding. Relatives whispered. A few avoided my parents for the rest of the night. Emily's perfect reception kept going, but something had cracked through the shine of it. My parents were not arrested. Their lives did not explode overnight. But their version of the story did. Within a week, Daniel sent a formal letter warning them not to contact me about the penthouse again. Some relatives texted private apologies. Others told me I should forgive them because weddings are stressful. I saved those messages too, then stopped answering. The unsigned papers went into a folder. So did Daniel's letter. And finally, so did Grandma's note. I read it at sunrise in the penthouse, standing by the same dining table, where I had once been too afraid to unfold it. She had written that she was leaving the home to me because I was the only one who ever treated it like a home, not a prize. I held the brass key in my palm until its edge pressed into my skin. The city outside was just waking up, pale light spreading across the windows Grandma loved. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt quiet again. Not empty. Quiet. I put the note back in the folder, beside the papers they had tried to use against me, and the letter that told them they could not keep coming for me. Then I walked to the door and locked it from the inside. Not because I was hiding. Because it was mine. And because being family does not give someone ownership over your life. Home is not where people demand your sacrifice. Home is where your peace is protected.